Greetings, Speaks of the Interwebs, Jake here. So, as you can tell by the title of this video, Gimli, Thorin, Dáin Ironfoot, these are not their real names. So, let me explain. Now, so for those of you who are less familiar with Tolkien's world and his mythology and the lore, all that jazz, so basically the dwarves have their own language called Khuzdul, and it's secretive. So the only people who know Khuzdul are dwarves. Now, since their language is very secretive, even if they gave out their names, that would give some kind of insight into their language. So, all the dwarves that we know, at least from the Third Age, and I'll kind of circle back to the Khuzdul language a little bit, and the dwarves we actually know the true names of later. But anyways, so all of the most familiar dwarves that we know, like Gimli, Thorin, and really all of Thorin's company, so Dwalin, Balin, Fili Kili, Dáin Ironfoot, all those dwarves, we know their adopted names, but we don't know their true names. So again, since Khuzdul is secretive, the dwarves adopted names that were similar to basically whoever they live near. Now, most dwarves live near men, and more specifically, the middlemen. So a little bit of history and context for you. So the middlemen encompassed most of the men of Middle Earth. So basically, like the Rohirrim, the men of Dale, the Woodmen, and men of Lake Town. So basically, anyone that wasn't from like Gondor, Arnor, or of Númenorian descent. Those were primarily middlemen, and also those who were not Easterlings and Southrons. So basically, also most middlemen lived in kind of the middle of Middle Earth. So kind of like everything east of the Misty Mountains and west of the Sea of Rune. So in that middle section, the middlemen, hence the name, or one of the reasons why they got that name. But digressing. And so most of the middlemen, Tolkien being a philologist, the names he used for, like, again, the Rohirrim were all Anglo-Saxon inspired, and a lot of the middlemen as well, like, again, Dalish, men from Lake Town, Woodmen, all had Anglo-Saxon or, like, Old English inspired names, or the further back you go, actually, and same thing with Hobbits, actually. Hobbits also have like Anglo-Saxon inspired names, but the further back you go in like the middlemen's history, their names are more inspired by Gothic, which Goths were a Germanic people, an Eastern Germanic people, which not going to go into like an actual history lesson or anything like that, because that would digress into a whole other tangent. And as much as I love history, this is about Middle Earth, but just again, give it a little bit of context. So basically, since most dwarves live near middlemen, they took on the names of, middlemen. So, again, Gimli, Gloin, Balin, Dwalin, these were all names that they took on to kind of ingratiate themselves a little bit easier into, to basically do trade and stuff like that. And so, again, all the dwarves that we know from the Third Age, those are their adopted names. We do not know their true Khuzdul names. So, this leads me into there are only 4 dwarves that Tolkien ever wrote about where we know their true Khuzdul names. So 3 of which I actually talked a little bit about in one of my previous videos about did the Noldor commit genocide. So basically in that video I talked about the 3 petty dwarves. So Neem and his sons Meme and Ebun. Or sorry, Meme and his sons Keem and Ebun. So, those are 3 of the dwarves that we know their true names to. So, they're not adopted names, that is their true Khuzdul names. The 4th one, and one of my favorite dwarves, is Azagal, who is a dwarf lord of Belagost. And this is during the First Age, same thing with the 3 petty dwarves, Meme, Keem, and Ebun. And so, I guess a little bit of a spotlight too on Azagal and why I like him so much. So, during the Battle of the Nine Nodiad, Glaurung was on the field, who's the first dragon who is, he was not a winged dragon, but he could breathe fire, which Glaurung I could probably do a whole other video on. But anyways, so Glaurung was quite the quite the nuisance for the free people of Middle Earth because he was pretty powerful. Even without wings, he was massive and, kind of hard to fight fire-breathing dragons, especially when they're huge, like Glaurung. But basically, during this battle, Azekal and his dwarves were on the field fighting alongside, humans and elves, and he managed to wound Glaurung. He died in the process, but he managed to wound Glaurung to the point to where Glaurung basically just fled from battle because he's like, "Oh shit, that hurt. Bye." And then because of Azaghal and his dwarves were so like fierce warriors, that as the dwarves kind of went to claim Azaghal's body, pretty much all the orcs and trolls and all the other servants of Morgoth who were on the battlefield just let them do it. They didn't try to impede on them collecting their fallen lord. They were basically just the equivalent of kind of as the dwarves were kind of marching their way through, all the orcs were kind of like, oh, my condolences, sorry for your loss, because they just did not want to mess with the dwarves at that point. And so, as little is written about Azaghal, dude's a badass. So little slight tangent, just kind of like talking about Azaghal and why I like him so much. But yeah, so pretty quick video on basically just talking about how and again, I know other Tolkien YouTube channels have talked about this, but me only dipping my toes recently in the Tolkien related videos because that's kind of my jam, and these videos seem to be doing quite well for this tiny channel. This just feeds my joy for talking about all things Tolkien and Middle Earth. But I definitely think it is something that's maybe less talked about compared to other topics with Middle Earth. So yeah, there you go. Khuzdul. Very secretive language. Only 4 dwarves that we know of ever used, or that we know their true names to. All the other dwarves, that's their adopted names. Gimli, no one knows what his real name is, except for Gimli and the other dwarves. Same thing with Thorin, and Dáin Ironfoot, Fili, Kili, Balin, Dwalin, Ori. Don't know their names. That's one thing that I really like so much about Tolkien's world building is he doesn't always have to give us the answers to everything. He just has to kind of, dip his toes a little bit in some of these aspects of the lore and the world building and stuff like that, just to make it feel that much more rich and lived in. So yeah, that wraps up this really short video, rambly as always, as is my typical fashion, but hopefully you enjoyed. Hopefully you found this informative and interesting. So leave your comments below on if you weren't aware of this, or if you were aware of this, who's your favorite dwarf? And what do you think their real name is? Do you think it's Jeff? It's probably not Jeff. But leave your comments below, do the usual YouTube-y stuff, like, comment, share, subscribe, give me your firstborn child, all that jazz. And until next time, everyone, cheers.